Chris Low joins us, ESPN.com, on the Stanley Fencing and Gates hotline, covering the world of college football. Chris, thank you for the time, as always. I think last week we were talking about Joe Milton, and we've talked recently with you about the Florida schedule. That's Tennessee's first SEC game. Florida has a trip to Utah before that. Is the Florida game when we'll first have a really good idea? Has Joe Milton taken that step? Is this offense going to return to form from where it was a year ago? Can we find out that quickly this season with Tennessee?
Well, I mean, first of all, Joe doesn't lose at Florida, so I don't know how much of a test that's really going to be for him. I mean,
that's on record now. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you think that will be brought up again before that game? I don't think Virginia poses much of a threat to Tennessee. Defensively, I don't think they can stack up with Tennessee. I don't think they have the horses. So yeah, I do think Florida is probably, when we find out, to some degree. I think that's still such a short body of work. What is that, the third game? That It's probably hard to really say that he's this or that. If he doesn't play great against Virginia the first 2 weeks, I don't think it would be fair to say, well, he's not lived up to the hype. And by the same token, if he lights them up, there's still Georgia and there's still Alabama and there's still Texas A&M. So, I mean, you guys know in the realm of the SEC, there's just no relenting. The grind of what the league is what separates it from every other league. So, but I think we at least get a window, Josh, into where he is as a quarterback, and a tough place to play. I mean, he's already probably made it a little bit more difficult on himself, the crowd. But I think Joe's probably the kind of competitor and the kind of guy that if he's ready to go, I don't think it really matters what the crowd says or what they do or how loud they are. I mean, if he's on, he's on.
Joe Milton's personality is infectious. His energy is infectious. He's very, very confident. I like me some Joe Milton. If I was Joe Milton, I would think I'm a little bit overhyped right now. Think about this hype that's going on right now in the offseason. It's basically off of one game. Chris, do you think Joe Milton has been a little bit overhyped during the offseason?
I mean, no question. I can't think of another player who's done, I don't want to say done less, but has not had a long history or a bigger body of work, Swain, who's got more love in the offseason than him. And I know why he has. I mean, he went to the Matting camp, showed out. He played well against Clemson last year in the Orange Bowl. He's got the skill set that the pro people love. So I get it. And he has played. He's been around. He's in Michigan for a while. He's been around Tennessee now for a couple of years. He's played, 2 years ago. He was the guy the first couple games, and then had to beat him out. And then last year he finished the season well. So, yeah, I think let's see what you got. And I think that's sort of probably most competitors and most people who are winners think that way. And I bet you down deep, Joe would tell you, A, he's very confident what he can do this year. B, he probably has gotten a little bit too much love and too many people talking about that he's going to be this or he's going to be a top 5 pick or he's the best quarterback in the SEC. I mean, go out and prove it. And I think that's probably what he has right now down inside is he wants to go out and prove that he's what everybody has said he is this offseason.
Got a couple more weeks before teams start to report and teams get ready for fall camp. What's the latest with the quarterback situation in Alabama? Who do you think has the edge right now in that 3-man race?
Everybody's got the edge. I would not count out Jalen Milroe. I think Milroe's a guy this offseason, the people I've talked to, who's been pretty dialed in. And I think the mere fact, Swain, that he didn't transfer when they brought in Buckner. But he could have. There was still that window that he could have transferred out, and he did. And neither did Ty Simpson. It tells me that he believes in himself. I was there in Alabama about 3 weeks ago, spent the whole day there, and talked to several people who said that Milroe is a guy that, in workouts, off-season workouts, with the other guys on the team, had really made some strides. So I'd watch him. Now, just because he or Buckner or Simpson starts first game doesn't mean they're going to finish. I think all three of those guys they're not the same player, but I'd say they're fairly comparable, what they've done. And, Simpson hasn't played a lot at the collegiate level. So a lot of it's probably going to depend on how they play at that position. I don't think that Alabama – well, I know that Alabama will not put nearly the pressure on the quarterback that they did the last few years with Bryce Young. Bryce was their guy. He was their catalyst. And in a lot of those games, they just said, Bryce, go win it. Which, if you got that kind of player, that's what you do. They're not going to play like that this year on offense. I think you're going to see Alabama play, or at least try to play, much similar to the way they played, several years ago. You think back when Jake Coker was there. Going way back when McElroy was a quarterback, Blake Sims, even A.J. McCarron some. They're still going to throw the ball, but they certainly going to try to run the ball better, throw the ball down the field over people's heads better, on play action, that kind of thing. But you're not going to see the kind of offense, or certainly you're not going to see the kind of burden placed on the quarterback that you've seen the last 2 years with Bryce Young.
Chris Low, ESPN.com here with us on Josh and Swain. Josh and I was having a conversation about favorite non-Tennessee football players of all time. I want to ask you, Chris, who has been one of your favorite guys in the SEC to cover that did not play at Tennessee? Your non-Tennessee player to cover during your career?
Well, right up there at the top is the guy we were just talking about, Bryce Young. I mean, what a neat kid, always the same. I mean, I don't care if you were talking to him in August after they played Auburn, after he threw for 400 yards, even before he became the full-time starter when Mac Jones was there. He's always the same guy, which probably tells you a lot about why he's the player he is. Very bright, very smart, and just an intense competitor. The fire, you talk about a fire burning quietly inside. I mean, he's that kind of guy. But love to watch him play, love to cover him. Jacob Hester at LSU is another guy that, of course, Jake, much like you, Swain, after a stellar career, has gone into the media. He was, one of those guys that just played every down, every play like it was his last. And I think the third guy, if you go back the last 10 years, and remember, I'm old. I go back to the 90s and the late 80s. So I got a chance to cover, a lot of really, really cool players and great players. But if you talk about the last decade, those would be two. And I'd put Connor Shaw right there, too, there at South Carolina. Connor Shaw is another guy that, he had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Didn't last long because he's just not really what you're looking for in an NFL quarterback. But, boy, as a college player and as a leader, and as a guy who played hurt and willed those South Carolina teams to tons and tons of victories, he was probably as enjoyable a college player as I've covered maybe ever. I've got to know Connor when he was there because they were so good, so I covered a lot of their games, have kept in touch with him afterward. But he's one of those guys. And you could ask any of those guys on that team. Those were great teams. You had Marcus Lattimore. You had Jadeveon Clowney. And I never forget Jadeveon telling me, listen, it was after a game, he pointed to Connor. Connor had a bad knee. He was limping up the hill. He said, that guy right there is our leader. And so those are three, certainly in the last decade outside Tennessee, that I enjoyed covering and watching play as much as anybody.
Do you know what to expect for the current South Carolina quarterback? Spencer Rattler has one more year. He's a guy that at one point was a Heisman favorite when he was at Oklahoma. He has one more run in Columbia this year.
And he has a new offensive coordinator, and I think Spencer, that's refreshing for Spencer. I don't know how great it was last year, and he's got a guy who's been in the NFL. I think Spencer will have a good year. I think he came on last year, showed what he could do. I don't know that he will feel as much pressure to open this season as he did last year. A lot of it, Josh, how well do they play around him? Can they protect him? Does he have some guys around him that can make plays? I think he'll have a good year. I think Spencer's one of those guys that came into last year with a chip on his shoulder, and I think that chip's only growing larger. It's the quarterback situation in the SEC. When you look across the league, there's some guys that could really break out. There's some guys that you mentioned Joe Milton, the kid at LSU is another one that I think people are expected to make just a massive step from where he was last year. And I think maybe one of the more underrated guys is KJ Jefferson. He's going to have a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterbacks coach at Arkansas. If he stays healthy, he's taking a lot of big hits because he runs the ball a lot. I think he's another one that could have a really big year for the Hogs.
Hey, before you go, Chris, you mentioned you've been around Tennessee a number of years, covered a lot of players. Who was your favorite wide receiver to cover at the University of Tennessee?
Well, that's easy, man. He was not only was he the best wide receiver, he was the best quote. He always showed up at media day. You never had to worry about him trying to ditch the media. That's number one on the field, number one in our hearts. The best number one to ever play at Tennessee, Mr. Jason Swain. And again, you talk about a quote machine. He was a quote machine.
Chris,
that's probably the only accurate part of that statement.
Quote machine?
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, would you be honest or would you be nice with your answer so we know which route you chose? I do remember this, though, as a media day. We were talking about media day stories yesterday. That was Jonathan Wade in 04 coming down the stairs doing the Gator Chomp and Bud Ford telling him to cut it out, and that was the 04 game where he had the incident with Dallas Baker. There was a media day one time where Swain's talking to the media. Swain, do you remember this? There's a media member who had come back from lunch that was served at Gibbs, and he had ice cream. And you just stopped. He asked you a question. You're like, before you answered, you said, "Is that an ice cream cone?" He brought ice cream to the media session. And I think Wilkerson and I would just say that quote to each other, just laughing at it, because it was just such a funny moment where somebody's asking you a question very seriously, but with ice cream, and you had to address the elephant in the media room before moving on.
Yeah, I was like, dude,
I think Swain was savvy. Swain even started answering the question. I think he sort of got into his answer.
I did.
And looked at him and said, "You're eating an ice cream cone."
Yeah.
So you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember. I was like, "You eating ice cream?"
I was there. I was present for that one. That one stands out. And Albert Hainsworth coming across the practice field swinging this massive stick, going after Will Offenhuzel. That's back when we could go to practice. I think it was right after media day that day.
Yeah.
And he's hollering and he's screaming. He felt like Offenhuzel was going after his knees. And he's got this stick. I don't know where he got it. If he got it in the weight room or you guys do conditioning, and he's swinging it, and Coach Fuller comes across the practice field. I always had a lot of respect for Phil. He comes across the practice field and grabs Albert right at his front of his shoulder pads and stops him in his tracks. And Coach Fuller comes across to where we're standing in the media and said, "Now you guys understand, what happens on the practice field is not to be reported." Everybody looks at him and said, I think Andy Staples was covering Tennessee then for the Chattanooga paper, and Andy says, "Coach, he was waving a stick."
Oh man!
Hey, one day all of us are gonna write a book, and there'll be some. Let's just say this: there'll be some stories in there that haven't been out there for public consumption.
Oh man, that's
yeah.
great.
You can go Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. You can do a series of books if you need to with all the stories that are there. Chris Low, ESPN.com, covering college football. Chris, we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon. We'll be less than a week away from media days this time next week. So thanks for the time today.
Yeah, look forward to it. Yeah, that's the unofficial kickoff for football.
That's right. Thanks, Chris. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you guys.